Good afternoon, and please be seated. So again, good afternoon, or shall I say, buon pomeriggio. My name is Susan Ross. I am the chair of the Department of Theology here at Loyola University Chicago, and it is my distinct pleasure to open this convocation by welcoming all of you here, thank you for coming, and by recognizing our distinguished participants. I would like especially to welcome our president, the Reverend Michael J. Garanzini of the Society of Jesus, our provost and chief academic officer, Dr. John Pellicero, our distinguished guests and members of the faculty and student body. We are here this afternoon for two reasons, both joyous, but also central to the life of a great university. The first is the installation of Professor Miguel H. Diaz as the John Courtney Murray, S.J., University Chair in Public Service. The John Courtney Murray Chair in Public Service is named for one of the most important Jesuit scholars of public life in the U.S., one who played a significant role at the Second Vatican Council in recognizing the importance of religious liberty. The second reason is the conferral of an honorary degree on His Eminence, Cardinal Gianfranco Ravasi, who is the president of the Pontifical Council for Culture, and about whom you will learn more very shortly. Honorary degrees are awarded to individuals in recognition of their distinctive and distinguished contributions to intellectual life, along with their achievements in service, leadership, commitment to the common good, and to the ideals of Loyola's Jesuit Catholic heritage. We are honored to welcome His Eminence, Cardinal Ravasi, to Loyola. So I would like to ask you now to stand, if you are able, in prayer. Good and gracious God, we ask your blessing on this happy occasion. Send your spirit of wisdom on our conversations and deliberations as we contemplate the relationship between our work as theologians and our relationship to the wider public. Give us the vision to recognize your face in our students, colleagues, faculty members, and all those whom we encounter in our society. Help us to work to eliminate all forms of poverty and oppression in our university, church, and society. Let your mercy inflame our hearts with love and compassion, and may we do all this in your holy name. Amen. Please, again, be seated. So I now invite Dr. John Pellicero, Provost of Loyola University Chicago, to come to the podium.
Good afternoon, and allow me to join Dr. Ross in welcoming you to the 2015 John Courtney Murray S.J. Inaugural Lecture given by Dr. Miguel Diaz. I'm pleased to welcome Loyola University Chicago's President, Michael Garanzini, His Eminence, Cardinal Gianfranco Ravasi, distinguished guests, faculty colleagues, Loyola staff and students, and the family and friends of Dr. Diaz who are with him today on this wonderful occasion. It is a privilege to be here on behalf of the Loyola academic community to induct Dr. Diaz as the Murray University Chair in Public Service. It is with pride and excitement, Miguel, that we recognize your distinguished career and your renowned scholarship in the field of theology. Endowed chairs hold a special role in the university's academic life. They symbolize not only a distinctive recognition of one's scholarly achievement, but also the confidence that the chairholder will continue fruitfully in his or her scholarship in ways consistent with Loyola's Jesuit heritage of knowledge in the service of others. Miguel H. Diaz the former U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See, joined Loyola in our Department of Theology this past fall as the John Courtney Murray University Chair in Public Service. Dr. Diaz obtained his doctorate in systematic theology from the University of Notre Dame. He is a member of the Catholic Theological Society of America and member and former president of the Academy of Catholic Hispanic Theologians of the United States. Last year, he was the recipient of the prestigious Virgilio Elizondo Award from that organization, given in recognition for distinguished achievement in theology. Among Dr. Diaz's scholarly interests are Trinitarian theology, theological anthropology, political theology, and Latino and Latina theology. A prolific writer and public speaker, Dr. Diaz is currently working on 2 books. One, Building Bridges, God, Diplomacy, and the Common Good, and the other, The Mystery of God in Latino-Latina Theology. He regularly contributes to efforts that bridge religion and foreign policy, especially as a member of the State Department's sub-working group on social justice. Miguel, I invite you to stand. Today, we salute you for your accomplishments. We encourage you in your continued search for truth, and we hope that you will serve Loyola for many years to come. I now give you Dr. Miguel H. Diaz, the John Courtney Murray, S.J. University Chair in Public Service, who will share his reflections on God, diplomacy, and the public good.
Your Eminence, Cardinal Gianfranco Ravasi, Father Michael Garanzini, Dr. John Pellicero, Dr. Susan Ross, colleagues, distinguished guests, my wife Marianne, and 2 of my 4 kids, Josh and Miguel David. In my extended family of friends who have traveled from near and far away. Thank you for coming from the bottom of my heart. During my tenure as U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See, I had the wonderful opportunity to visit Venice. During this visit, I toured the hall of the Doge's palace called La Sala del Collegio. This majestic hall contained several paintings that suggest the central role that religion played in what was once a key geopolitical place for conducting diplomatic relations. Of particular interest is the fact that this was the hall where the Dutch used to welcome governors, bishops, and ambassadors. The ceiling, which contains 3 central depictions, relates the role of religion in society. It was commissioned in 1575 from Paolo Veronese, a great painter of the Italian Renaissance. 2 events frame the historical context of this frame. The peace treaty that the Republic of Venice had concluded with the Turks in 1573, and 2, the ongoing tensions between the Republic of Venice and the papacy in Rome. Religion and its diplomatic contribution to the common good within the Venetian politics was the central motif of Veronese paintings. How fitting that this painting should be part of the heritage of Venice. Venice was once characterized as the city of bridges, and still today it is known as such. Such characterization is appropriate not only because of the multiple bridges that unite Venice, but also because the Venetian Republic cultivated a web of diplomatic relations with the Ottoman Empire that went beyond the Christian West to include relations with Jewish and Muslim communities. Berenice's painting at the Doge's Palace suggests a very ancient place that religion has occupied at the diplomatic table in the service religious ideas and actors can render to advance the common good. One need only recall the fact that the Holy See has been engaged in diplomacy long before the birth of the modern nation-states. A perusal of the state of human relations at the global scale outlines the challenges that confront the human family today. Ethnic and religious tensions in the Balkans, unresolved tensions in the Middle East, the uncontrolled violence in Syria, social political instability in Ukraine, Africa, Latin America, and Asia, the inhumane atrocities of ISIS, global poverty, the human rights violations that include trafficking of persons, and various oppressions rooted on race, ethnicity, religion, gender, and sexual orientation. As we are becoming increasingly aware, the world also faces unprecedented climate changes. Drought in some areas of the world, flooding in others, and a lack of adequate access to the Earth's natural resources have already caused millions to go without food or water and have displaced numerous persons and communities. Migration has become a world concern crying out for our attention. Today, one of every 35 persons on this earth is a migrant. It is no minor coincidence that Pope Francis's first official trip outside of Rome in 2013 was to the island of Lampedusa, the Ellis Island of Europe. There, Pope Francis expressed his preferential option for the plight of the undocumented and poor and invited all men and women of goodwill to denounce cultures that globalize human indifference. As a nation, we face many of these same global challenges right in our backyards. Whether we speak of poverty in our land, our broken immigration system, homeless persons in our cities, millions of persons who still lack basic health care, violence in our streets, shortages of fresh water supplies, or discrimination based on race, gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, physical ability, our nation is in great need of healing and of internal diplomacy. In the role of just building bridges so that we can become from the many the one people under God that our founders envisioned is still something to be achieved. Within this context, the public voice of theologians in the tradition of John Courtney Murray and in line with his deeply held, culturally held convictions, is much needed as a valuable contribution to the common good. Murray understood that theology, and more specifically Catholic theology, and American democracy were not in opposition to one another. Christian theology, which I suggest can be defined as faith that seeks to build bridges, when critically and humbly placed at the service of humanity, can provide valuable insights to overcome our globalization of human indifferences. Today, I am deeply grateful and honored to occupy this endowed chair at Loyola University Chicago as the John Courtney Murray University Chair in Public Service. I am prepared to embrace this chair with the academic and social responsibilities that it carries. Following the footsteps of John Courtney Murray, I intend to serve this university, our city, and our nation, drawing wisdom from my family life, academic life, and diplomatic life. In a special way, I am delighted to be able to embrace and promote in various ways and events that I will organize in the coming years, a thoughtful relationship between religion and society, and engage the Catholicity of Christian faith and doctrine with the human-building truth that emerge from the diversity of peoples that constitutes the United States of America and the broader global community of nations. As a Jesuit, John Courtney Murray's ideas reflected St. Ignatius of Loyola's central spiritual principle to discern the presence of God in all things. Suffice to highlight Murray's relentless efforts to affirm religious diversity and freedom, his arguments favoring the separation of church from state, and his numerous essays in which he convincingly defended the value of our American democracy. For Murray, nothing could be more basic than sustained reflection on the age-old question to relate the city of God with the cities of this world. And so we might ask ourselves this afternoon, what can Jerusalem speak to Athens? And what can Athens speak to Jerusalem? As humans think and act on behalf of the common good. So why should Catholics care about public involvement and politics? Why should they invest in the cities, nations, and the world in which we live? John Courtney Murray suggests a theological way of addressing these questions when he appeals to the heart of the Catholic theological imagination in one of his notable essays. He writes, and I quote, "The tendency towards an incarnational humanism is founded on accents laid on other and no less Christian principles. The end of the human person, it asserts, is indeed transcendent, supernatural. But it is an end of the human, and its achievement, the human person truly finds the perfection of his or her nature. Grace perfects nature, does not destroy it. This is the central point of emphasis. The body of Christ is really a building here in time, and its growth is that of a body, not simply of a soul. The res sacra, which grace would achieve, is likewise a rex humana. It is a res humana in the fullest sense of the term. Proposing creative ideas that can be used as building blocks to engineer our earthly cities, enjoining goodwill efforts to perfect human nature in its manifold and distinct expressions, describes the work of all public theology and popular diplomacy. By public theology, I don't just mean theological teaching and research that occurs at seminaries and universities. My definition includes the work of all men and women of faith who, from their distinctive areas of expertise and within their ordinary life experiences, respond in critical and faith-filled words and ethically and faith-motivated deeds to the signs of our time. By popular diplomacy, I don't just mean the work carried out by those officially charged to represent the capitals of the world, but those who build bridges of justice that can be done locally, nationally, and internationally by all men and women of goodwill, especially on behalf of the poor and marginalized. Indeed, the work of theology, and I would add diplomacy, is too important to be carried out by a few of us or restricted as a topic of conversation merely within the ivory towers of our educational and political institutions. As Pope Francis recently observed relative to theology, and I quote him, "We must guard against a theology that is exhausted in academic dispute or watching humanity from a glass castle. At this time, theology must also take responsibility for conflicts, not only those that we experience within the church, but also those that concern the whole world and those which live on the streets. Do not settle for a theology desktop," the Pope argues. He continues, "and do not fall into a temptation to paint, to perfume, to adjust them a bit and tame them. Even good theologians are good shepherds. They smell of the people and of the road, and by their reflection they pour oil and wine on the wounds of men and women." Theology is an expression of a church which is a field hospital, which lives its mission of salvation and healing in the world. End of quote. The Cardinal that Loyola University honors today, His Eminence Cardinal Gianfranco Ravasi, is not only one of the greatest minds in the Roman Curia, but is also someone who does not settle for our theology desktop. Cardinal Ravasi knows how much the world is in need of multiple and diverse theological and diplomatic efforts to bridge religion and society, Catholicism and the modern world. Through his groundbreaking initiatives titled Il Cortile di Gentile, Cardinal Ravasi has embraced critical and faith-filled conversations with faithful secularists and atheists alike, in hopes of advancing the common good. In 2012, during my diplomatic service, I was privileged to have been one of the panelists the Cardinal invited to address the subject of diplomacy and truth when the Pontifical Council for Culture hosted in Rome the Court of the Gentiles. The presence of theologians, other scholars, diplomats, and civic leaders at this courtyard of the Gentiles attests to the kind of communal, faith-filled, critical, and practical efforts that Cardinal Ravasi believes are necessary to advance in word and in deed the common good. A person, writes Cardinal Ravasi in one of his recent books, quote, does not communicate only with spoken words, but with performed actions, end of quote. Today, in the spirit of John Courtney Murray, theologians who respond to God's self-communication within history must offer humanizing words that can contribute to the perfection of our earthly cities in accordance with the heavenly city of God. Diplomats must also continue the arduous work of building a res humana, an authentically global and inclusive human family. Jerusalem will always need Athens, and Athens will always need Jerusalem. The spoken words of religiously minded thinkers need the performed actions of diplomats and vice versa. Theologians who offer their critical reflections on behalf of the common good must listen to actual street practitioners who often know best what it takes to build authentic human relations in the midst of so many and varied human conflicts. Practitioners of diplomacy, especially those associated with the capitals of the world, who may be tempted to all too quickly dismiss critical religious thinking as useless and abstraction, risk objectifying, falsifying, alienating, demonizing, instrumentalizing, and misrepresenting the real needs of human persons and communities that exist at the crossroads of local and globalized interests. The mutual interdependence between words of faith-filled reasoning with the world of actions, both on behalf of the common good, can lead to a new Venetian moment in history. Let's future our human past by designing new cities characterized by bridge-building efforts between religion and society. Let's hear in these new cities the voice of God calling us to practice the most basic and simple act that makes us truly human in God's image, the act of hospitality. The act of hospitality, which can be understood as the human capacity to discern and receive God in all peoples and things, especially in those that stand in communal solidarity with the crucified Christ, should be our call. Let me end these remarks on a personal note to my friend Cardinal Ravasi for the hospitality in word and in deed that he has extended to my wife Marian, to me and my family during the years that we have known each other since my arrival in Rome. Carissimo amico Cardinal Ravasi, mille grazie perché come persona tu non mi hai solo accolto con la tua parola, ma anche con la tua azione compiuta. Grazie.
Thank you, Miguel, for your thoughtful and timely reflections, and congratulations once again on your installation as the Murray University Chair in Public Service. It's official, you can't back off it now. So I now invite to the podium another distinguished chairholder and colleague, Dr. Edmondo Lupieri, the John Cardinal Cody Chair in Theology. And Dr. Lupieri, in turn, will introduce His Eminence, Cardinal Gianfranco Ravasi, read the citation, and present the candidate for the degree.
Your Eminence, Father President, dear Provost, Your Excellency, Deans and Chairs, faculty colleagues of Loyola University Chicago, Reverend Fathers of the Society of Jesus, and friends, dear guests, and particularly dear students. Let me begin my introduction of His Eminence, the Cardinal Gianfranco Ravasi, with this 2011 quote from John Allen of the National Catholic Reporter. Quote, "The guy who pitches Dos Equis beer may or may not really be the most interesting man in the world. But you can make a strong case that the most interesting man in the Catholic Church, at any rate today, is Italian Cardinal Gianfranco Ravasi, President of the Vatican's Pontifical Council for Culture." End of quote. Well, needless to say, anything that I can say now to you after such a quote will something of an anticlimax. How in this brief introduction can one adequately bring to expression something of the vitality and life of the most interesting man in the Catholic Church? A priest and scholar from the industrious region of Lombardy, northern Italy, Cardinal Ravasi is distinguished by his Renaissance-like erudition and by a bold, venturesome spirit exemplified in the remarkably creative project that he has recently initiated as President of the Pontifical Council for Culture. Cardinal Ravasi spent much of his career as Prefect of the Ambrosian Library and Art Gallery in Milan, and credits his bold venturing spirit to that experience and to the friendship established during that time with persons from outside the Curia and from outside of the Church. To quote John Allen again, this time in an article titled Vatican's Smartest Kid in the Class Keeps Making Waves. Yes, it was. Cardinal Ravasi states of himself, quote, "My first advantage is that I do not come from the Curia. I come from the secular world." And then after a while, when I was in Milan, half of my friends were atheists from different backgrounds, end of quote. The most recent manifestation of Cardinal Ravasi's affinity for persons outside the Church is his creation of an initiative entitled the Courtyard of the Gentiles, already mentioned by Miguel, a series of dialogues designed to foster relationships with the secular world. The series of dialogues is not simply an attempt to engage unbelievers on home turf at the Vatican. The Courtyard of the Gentiles project has organized high-profile events in Bologna, Paris, Bucharest, Tirana, Stockholm, and Rome, and engage such questions as, can one choose a world without God? How far can the human person go in the field of creation? Are there limits? And if so, what are they? Another initiative undertaken by Cardinal Ravasi as President of the Pontifical Council for Culture was the hosting of the Vatican's own pavilion at the 2013 Biennale of Art, the art festival in Venice, in which artists were invited to exhibit works that reflect the first 11 chapters of Genesis. This project also exemplifies Cardinal Ravasi's engagement with persons from outside of the Church. To stick to the words of John Allen, he's an old friend, was here, you may remember being here also last fall. Well, John says, for Ravasi, staging a pavilion at a major international arts festival is no gimmick. It's a concrete way of showing that the Church has something more than moralizing or disapproval to offer artists, that it wants dialogue too, beyond the usual polemics, end of quote. While his first desire, if you look at his bio, was to be a teacher of the Greek and Roman classics, Cardinal Ravasi underwent a change of heart and mind and began his path toward ordination by entering the seminary in Milan, where he was ordained by Cardinal Giovanni Colombo on June 1966. After his ordination, he studied at the Pontifical Gregorian University and the Pontifical Biblical Institute in Rome, during which time he perfected his mastery of ancient Greek, Hebrew, and other ancient and modern languages. While working on his doctorate, he also worked on archaeological digs in Turkey, Iraq, and Syria. A professor of exegesis of the Old Testament at the Theological Faculty of Northern Italy until 1989, Cardinal Ravasi published important commentaries on Psalms, the Book of Job, Song of Songs, and Ecclesiastes. Still, his important scholarship on the Old Testament represents only a portion of his prodigious output. He has published or edited about 150 books on different subjects and written with incredible regularity in important Catholic magazines, Italian, like the weekly Famiglia Cristiana and the monthly Jesus, which is Jesus, but we call it Jesus. He continues to contribute to cultural questions of the time in national and prestigious Italian newspapers, like for the Italophiles in the Rome, I remember the Corriere della Sera, or the Sunday cultural edition of the Sole 24 Ore. Cardinal Ravasi has also hosted his own Sunday morning television show, Frontiers of the Spirit, on which he has given interpretive readings of the Bible. So I fear that this brief introduction really fails to capture the full vitality and life of Cardinal Ravasi. But it is indeed an honor and a personal joy for me to introduce to you this servant of the Church and the world, one of the most illustrious sons of my country, His Eminence, the Cardinal Gianfranco Ravasi. Now I would invite Your Eminence and Father President to come closer. Reverend President, His Eminence Cardinal Gianfranco Ravasi has devoted his life to the service of the Church and the study of the Word of God in the sacred scriptures, particularly in the Old Testament. Cardinal Ravasi is a scholar, prolific writer, and educator who taught Old Testament in the Catholic Theological Faculty of Northern Italy. He is well known for cultivating broader cultural interest and a passion for the arts and sciences. Before coming to Rome, he was the prefect of the Biblioteca-Pinacoteca Ambrosiana in Milan, thereby assuming responsibility for one of the most prestigious libraries in Italian Catholic history. In 2007, Pope Benedict appointed him as president of the Pontifical Council for Culture, as well as president of the Pontifical Commission for the Cultural Heritage of the Church and of the Commission for Sacred Archeology. Because of his great achievements and service to the Church, Pope Benedict created and proclaimed him a cardinal in 2010. In 2011, Cardinal Ravasi launched in Paris one of his signature initiatives called the Courtship of the Gentiles. This initiative has opened up spaces for dialogue between believers and non-believers in various corners of the world. Reverend President, through his work and his ministry, Cardinal Ravasi has embodied the heart of the Jesuit mission to discern the presence of God in all things, particularly through his various efforts to engage contemporary culture. Therefore, I recommend the degree of Doctor of Humane Letters, honoris causa, be conferred upon him.
Upon the recommendation of the faculty of Loyola University Chicago, and by the authority granted to Loyola University Chicago by the state of Illinois, and delegated to me by the Board of Trustees of this university, I confer upon your eminence the degree for which you have been recommended, Doctor of Humane Letters, honoris causa.
It is with great emotion that I come to speak in this glorious American educational and cultural institution. The fundamental sentiment of gratitude for the honor that has been reserved for me is entwined with admiration for this place, which exalts the Catholic presence in the United States and shows the liveliest, most authentic face of the Society of Jesus. I thank, then, the President, Father Michael Garanzini, the friends, Dr. Miguel Diaz and Edmondo Lupieri, and others academic authorities, and the student body, among whom I feel ideally welcome. This is an experience that is particularly dear to me, having spent a greater part of my life in university teaching. Certainly, I am a European and have visited this country only a few times, but from a distance I have always taken an interest in your culture, especially in the literature that it has offered, beginning with the 19th century authors Dickinson, Poe, Whitman, Hawthorne, London, Melville, Mark Twain, Henry James, and others, an extraordinary portrait of existence and of human society. And again, the 20th century, you produced a true and proper gallery of authors of universal acclaim, such as Hemingway, Faulkner, Fitzgerald, Kerouac, Flannery O'Connor, Salinger, Roth, Bellow, Updike, and others. One writer from my own country, the Italian Mario Soldati, in his work America Primo Amore, affirmed that America is not just a part of the world. America is a state of mind, a passion. Any European can, at any time, fall sick with Americanitis. The reason for this attraction is manifold and comes from the original identity of American civilization. It is a question that was already being asked in 1782 in a lapidary style by John Hector St. John de Crèvecoeur in his letters from an American farmer. What then is the American, this new man? Responses have been many. and were already anticipated in the same Declaration of Independence of the United States of America. The values of equality, of fundamental rights of life and liberty, of the common good, of hospitality through social inclusion of foreigners are the most genuine physiognomy of the citizen of the United States. Europeans discovered in this portrait of Homo Americanus qualities that had been celebrated in the whole continent, but that had blenched there and sometimes had become extinct. Emblematic of this in the 1800s is the figure of the French statesman Alexis de Tocqueville, who in his essay De la démocratie en Amérique established an antithetic dialectic parallel between the outcomes of the French Revolution and of the American one. Quotation: "The revolution in the United States was produced by a measured and thoughtful taste for liberty, and not by a vague and undefined instinct for independence. It was not based upon passions for disorder. On the contrary, it proceeded with love and order and of legality." This does not mean that American culture itself has not perceived its own limits, beginning with its own presidents, such as Thomas Jefferson, who in his notes on Virginia did not hesitate to write, "I fear for my country when I reflect that God is just." Famous intellectuals such as Truman Capote or Norman Mailer or Noam Chomsky have sunk the sword of criticism harshly into the social texture of the United States. Others, such as David Riesman and especially Christopher Lasch, with his famous essay, "The Culture of Narcissism," have noted the tangled knots, the weaknesses, the crises that should those values considered as patrimony of the American society. In this ever more complex context, marked now by the new information and digital revolution, which is generating a new anthropological and sociological phenotype, how can the Catholic cultural presence be situated? It is known that the concept of culture is no longer that of the Enlightenment aristocracy, which referred to the arts, the sciences, and philosophy. Now, instead, culture designates the complex whole of values and symbols, objective, collective, and transversal, held by people across the social classes. In this light, the Christian message takes us on a profound meaning, for it can enrich and transform the same traditional founding values of the American culture. These values, in fact, in many aspects, belong to a basic anthropological category now subject to many criticism and variations, but nevertheless important. We refer here to the concept of human nature. It expresses itself in American society in some typologies that allow a fruitful dialogue with Christian understanding. As a fundamental premise, an extraordinary logion or saying of Christ can be chosen, a true and proper tweet ante litteram, composed in Greek of the Gospels in only 53 characters, including spaces. Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God. Always in the life, culture, history, and in the same American Constitution, church and state have been rigorously distinct and separate. Society and religion, however, are not. Indeed, between the two, there is always an attraction and a tension, an encounter, sometimes a clash, but never separation or indifference. The history of many other countries is built on this dialectic. The Catholic University must also participate in this encounter of faith and society, offering its own rigorously defined and studied Weltanschauung. It can sustain and enrich some equilibria on which contemporary society, particularly American society, is built. We can give some examples of these balances or equilibria in outline. On one side, there is the importance of the human person and so of individual identity and dignity. On the other side, the common good must be made, and the development of the polis, that is the entire community. On one side, the affirmation of liberty with its creativity and rights. On the other side, the affirmation of the duties of justice, solidarity, respect, and living together. On one side, there is an economic commitment for well-being. On the other side, the safeguarding of ethical, spiritual, and cultural values, for man does not live by bread alone. On one side, the diverse original ethno-cultural identities must express themselves in their variety and richness. On the other side, democracy is a common perimeter within which all must know how to coexist, sharing some values and fundamental unifying symbols. We could continue at length the list of poles of coexistence and illustrate them in light of the Christian message and the social doctrine of the Church, without prevaricating fundamentalism, but also without absences or silences that impoverish common existence. But to do this, the Catholic University must endow itself with a competent and educational intellectual apparatus. There are two primary components to be developed: education and instruction. The first has to do with the formation of the person as a whole. This was the great French moral thinker Michel de Montaigne affirmed incisively when he suggested the educator should prefer plutôt la tête bien faite que bien pleine. There is a need to shape the way we think and not just fill the brain with data, notions, and information. This is why it's important to have not just instruction, but also an integral education of the person, spiritually, morally, intellectually, artistically, physically, sportively, and socially. A famous English thinker of the 1800s, the philosopher, theologian, and also Cardinal John Henry Newman, had no hesitation to declare in this work the idea of a university. The Catholic university education, before forming Christians or Catholic, should create gentlemen. That university should form the student for life and not just for the school. It's not just a rhetorical phrase long ago formulated by the Latin philosopher Seneca, non vitae sed scholae discimus, but it is the program on which the Catholic educational institution must be built. This, as I said, is the most complete sense of culture. There is, however, a second component that is intrinsically connected to the first, and it is the strictly intellectual one: instruction. This begins with the extraordinary cultural patrimony Christianity has offered over the centuries in all disciplines. It is the inheritance of art, science, and thought, and is united intimately with the spiritual and moral Christian vision of man, of woman, and of society. Along these lines, the Catholic University must establish a constant encounter with the global cultural horizon, and this is what has been happening for nearly 2 centuries in an exemplary manner at Loyola University Chicago. I think, for example, of the dialogue with science through the specific faculties of science and engineering, gathering the challenges that technology poses to bioethics, and then that post-humanist launches at Christian anthropology itself. I think, too, of the world of the economic financial disciplines that require a formation of a humanistic kind, not just a merely technical one. And I think, too, of the encounter with the world of art in its new expressive grammars in architecture, painting, or sculpture, in music, cinema, and in television. I think of the attention that has to be given to communication that has adopted not just new instruments, but also created a new environment that surrounds the entire world through the World Wide Web. In this intellectual work, the presence of teaching Catholic theology acquires a particular significance. Its specific epistemological stature can, in fact, dialogue with those of other cultural disciplines without prevaricating and without being timid. Christianity, in its primary ideals and foundational morals, is open to dialogue with the different spiritual expressions, and so the Catholic University becomes the home for ecumenical and interreligious dialogue. These and other experiences you have are for a universal church a great inspirational model, especially for the inculturation of the faith and for a church that is outgoing or goes forth, as Pope Francis affirms in Evangelii Gaudium. In today's secularized society and in the great anonymous super cities, what dominates is not atheism, but apatheism, that religious apathy, indifference to ethical and spiritual values. The presence of a university community such as this at Loyola can bring about the program that Christ had proposed to his disciples in the Sermon on the Mount through an efficacious trilogy of images. You are the salt of the earth, you are the light of the world. A city that is on top of a mountain can't remain hidden. Thank you.
Thank you, Cardinal Ravasi, for sharing your insights with us and for accepting the honorary degree. It's an honor for us to confer this upon you. Many thanks also to all of you for being with us today, and this is the end of our program. So following the recessional, we invite all of you to a reception in honor of His Eminence and Dr. Miguel Díaz in McCormick Lounge of Coffee Hall, which is just across the area to our right. So, and the staff members will help show you the way out. So again, thank you very much. I hope to see you at the reception. And again, thank you to our distinguished guests and our wonderful speakers.